quick thank you to our sponsors for making this podcast possible. They keep this show free to listen to. Does connected parenting feel confusing? What do I do in this situation? How do I handle that issue? Let me help you make more sense of it all in my 30-day challenge. We meet for 4 weeks of group coaching, and you get access to all of the Peace in Parenting online materials, my entire Connected Parent Mastermind. Plus, we give you access to our school community. I help you get more connected and jumpstart your parenting in this 30-day challenge. So go to the show notes and sign up, and I'll see you there. Hi, I'm Michelle, a mother of 2 teens. 13 years ago, I traded in punishments and rewards for connection. Now I prioritize relationship over behaviors, utilize play as a parenting tool, and set limits with empathy instead of consequences. Each week, I share my journey and interview clients, experts, and followers. Thanks for joining me on the Peace in Parenting podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to the Peace in Parenting podcast. I'm Michelle, and I'm so fortunate to have Destini here on my podcast today. And I follow her very religiously on Instagram and am so taken by her reels and her authenticity and the way she comes at parenting. And I think we have a lot of things in common, but I'm always like, oh, that was such a good one. That was such a great one. You have such good ideas. So welcome to the Peace in Parenting podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about the conversation that we're going to have today.
Yeah, me too. We're going to talk about why these parenting ideology is challenging and what challenges we come up against and how that can be hard.
Yeah, I think it's a good time to have that conversation.
I think so too. And the first, I listed a few things, and Destini was so smart. She's like, well, those all kind of follow under this overarching idea that, you know, this parenting ideology is difficult and what are the roadblocks. And one of the first one is that I listed was self-regulation, and just how, self-regulation in this space is, it's necessary, but it's super hard and super challenging. What do you see is the biggest challenge in that piece?
Well, the biggest challenge obviously is the process of doing it, because a lot of us don't realize that we don't know how to do it in this capacity. But I will say that what I'm seeing, just in a sense of with my community and the feedback I get, is that there's a fear that constantly focusing on regulating yourself leads to permissive parenting. If it's always about, let me look at me, let me look at how I'm responding, check my tone, X, Y, and Z, at what point does the child become responsible for their regulation skills and for how they're responding and their behaviors? So I think that is why some people are just like, nope, it's not for me, because I have a kid that has this kind of tone. And so if I don't match the tone, then they're not going to do this and they're not going to do that. And it's like, quote unquote, not working, which we talked about has a very different definition in this parenting style. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge, is coming back to self and staying on this mission of, I have to be regulated in order for my child to be regulated. And even if my regulation doesn't create regulation in my child, that does not mean that it's now my opportunity to get dysregulated in order to change their behavior.
Thank you. Yes, I think so immensely. And the other piece of it is that a lot of people believe, like, well, if I don't correct my child in the moment when they're dysregulated, if I don't get loud, if I don't get punitive, if I don't get corrective, then they're getting away with something. Then I'm allowing them to behave in a certain way. And so my dysregulation is almost warranted in order to get the behavior to stop. What do you say to that?
I see this a lot from a lack of proactive parenting. And I hate to put it that way, because so many of us are not proactive parenting for reasons that are not of our fault. And so I don't like to shame parents, but from my perspective, if I'm proactively parenting, then I know my daughter knows the rule. I know, or the expectation, or what, like, I know it. So it's not something that I even need to teach in the moment. This is because I've already taught it. That just means that she's having a challenge implementing it because of something going on beneath the behavior. So it's almost like backwards of me, you know what I'm saying, to try to teach it right now, because she got the concept. when we've been teaching it this entire time. So something is happening with my child. It's almost like if, you know, you taught your child how to walk, right? And so if they could not walk in this moment, you wouldn't be like, walk, you need to walk. Like, what is wrong with you? Going on. There's a reason why they can't display a behavior that you've been repeatedly teaching and modeling, etc. And so that's what brings me back. It's like, no, my child needs help with this right now. She doesn't need to learn it because I'm always teaching it.
Well, and also if you're not always teaching it, or if you question whether maybe she didn't get that concept, is that the moment to teach anything? And our self-regulation is so important in that moment, but it's hard. It's so hard, especially if we grew up in families that were super explosive or very punitive or yeller, come from yelling. It's like, it's so hard to find our calm.
Mm, but then that's the question of why is it hard? And if that's the reason that it's hard, then essentially let's not make it hard for our kids.
Yeah. So true.
That's the cycle of it, right?
Yep. Okay, let's go on to the next one. The perfect parent. I have to say the perfect thing. I have to have the perfect script. I have to have all the perfect words. I have to respond perfectly. And if I don't, then I'm ruining everyone and I'm ruining my kids. And there's so much pressure on our sweet parents. And I feel like we've really, set ourselves up to this perfection. I mean, not all of us, but some of us, there's this idea of that. This was me. Like I had to be the perfect parent. And, it's setting yourself up for failure.
When you say perfect parent, do you mean in terms of how your child is displaying, like my child has to be happy, or do you mean perfect, like I can't mess up?
I think both. For me personally, it was both. Like I needed to have the child that behaved perfectly, and I needed to be the perfect parent, and everything needed to be in order.
I gotcha. Okay,
That's
so
deep
for me, I
perfectionism.
definitely okay, I gotcha. Yeah. So I don't even know if I was parenting. I don't know if I was aware of a desire to be a perfect parent or to get it right, but I did have a very strong desire for my child to be happy and for her to think that I was the perfect parent.
Right.
But I don't know if I necessarily had as much pressure of like, I'm supposed to do this, and this. So I'm like wondering, like, did that make you be more rigid, or was, because for me it made me very permissive. Yeah, because I'm like, it's just all about what she wants, so I need to be permissive. But for you, it's like I need to check these boxes, and if you got boxes, then you need to be in line so I can check these boxes. It was more rigidity for you.
Yeah, it was like, I come from a teaching background. So mine was like, I'm going to reward you and I'm going to punish you into behaving and getting into my box and my checking. And so I can check it all off. So yeah, I became harsh and rigid.
Okay, I gotcha. And so, yeah, in that instance, it's gonna be a challenge. Let's say you are trying to like peaceful parent, but you also have this perfectionist idea because you're watching all the Instagram videos and blah, blah, blah. You're going to constantly be in a state of dysregulation because a child, if you are giving them the freedom to grow in their autonomy, they are not going to fit in these perfect boxes. They are going to slow you down. They are going to make you late. They are going to do exactly what you and them sat down and collaborated on not doing. All of these things are going to happen. And so if the goal for yourself is perfection, then the goal for your child is going to be perfection. And so those two things, like perfect parenting and peaceful parenting or respectful parenting, can't live together because you're not respecting yourself. You're not respecting the reality of what it means to be a human for yourself. So you're not going to be able to genuinely do that for your child.
Yeah. And I think the pressure just becomes so insurmountable that we just bust open with all of our wounds and our upsets and spew that all over. That's what I did. Spewed it all over my kids. And then I think there's a sector of people out there who believe like, okay, well, if I can't be perfect, then I can't do this method. Then this isn't going to work for me. And I think the idea of perfect is that our child does have to behave all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That we're looking for behavior. We're looking for, and for many of us, obedience, cooperation, like all the things that conventional parenting says you absolutely need.
Yeah. And that's a challenging conversation to have with people because conventional parenting makes sense in a conventional life. It's actually kind of necessary in a conventional life. And it's hard to have that conversation of like, no, this is actually an overhaul of how you see the world and the choices that you make for yourself. And that's a tough conversation to have because if somebody says to me, well, I have to control my kid because I don't have control over what time I have to be to work, or I don't have control over how her dad is going to respond if she doesn't do X, Y, and Z. My immediate thought is just like, God, this is why you don't have control, because so much of your own autonomy was taken, but
Yeah.
you do have agency. And that's a difficult conversation for people to have, is that what you don't realize is you're prioritizing other values over your value for your child and the parent-child relationship.
Yeah. The relationship for 100%. And I do see that this type of parenting isn't going to give you like the immediate results like conventional parenting. Like if you yell at a child and you can scare them into behaving, of course that makes you feel like it's a win to some degree. But what I see with this parenting ideology is that you have to build in relationship a lot. You have to build in a lot of collaboration, like you said, a lot of places where we can come together. And then eventually over time, you do see more cooperation. You do see a child who wants to follow your lead because they're bought into you, but it's so hard to give people that. They want the immediate, like, what do I do right now when I have to go to work at 8 a.m.?
Yeah. Well, you didn't always parent this way, yes?
Heck no.
Right. And so I think that is the big challenge, is like, I have had years of mistrust and I've had years of disempowering my child. So, and there was immediate behavior. And so now not only am I trying to play the long game, but I'm not playing the long game with a baby or the long game with a toddler. Like this is a child essentially at this point. And so it's very hard to rebuild trust as it is. So there are going to be behavior struggles that maybe they didn't previously see. And that's really challenging for parents to navigate and be like, I'm playing the long game. To some parents, it feels like we're moving backwards.
Yes.
I'm causing harm to my child because now they're having behaviors they didn't have previously. And I think that is really challenging for some parents to grasp, kind of the going backwards to go forward. And I know that some parents are just like, the relationship isn't worth it. Their behavior was working. They were successful. They were doing well. They listened. It was calm in the house. Or it probably wasn't calm, but I was getting my way. It felt convenient, right? And so I think that's probably a big challenge that parents who didn't previously parent this way, they feel that.
Oh yeah, I felt that big time. I mean, I found this ideology when she was 5, my oldest. So it wasn't like, she wasn't very old, but at the same time, I had spent 14 years in public school using punishments and rewards. And so I thought I knew everything about kids, right? You could just punish them or reward them into behaving. And when you look at that in your own parenting as a parent, it doesn't work to create a loving relationship, especially if you have a very strong-willed child. She wasn't going to have it. It was damaging every morsel of what we had because she felt resentful and angry because I was manipulating her.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think that when you start to balance the power out in your parenting, you actually get a better idea of who your child really is without the punishments and the rewards. And so those things are going to come up. And for me, it's that sign of, oh, wow, these are the things that she needs to work on, like the things that we need to discover. And thank God, I mean, we're figuring that out now.
Yeah.
Because when I'm gone, authority looks very different when you're an adult versus when you're a child. You have so much more autonomy, a lot less dependency. And so these behaviors that we think we're shielding our kids from by forcing them to do things are going to come out in some way when the punishments are gone, the consequences are gone, the rewards are gone. And so I'm actually glad that those things are coming up, because 1, we get to work on them together, but 2, we get to have the relationship for her to feel safe to work on these things.
Yeah. So good. Before we continue, let's take a moment to thank our sponsors. Their support lets us keep bringing you the show completely free. You know what I don't miss at all? The vicious week before my period. I always used to feel like I was walking in quicksand and craving the most unhealthy of foods. My sleep was always off and my moods were unpredictable. Now it's easier to manage PMS with Estro Control. Happy Mammoth, the company that created Hormone Harmony, is dedicated to making women's lives easier. And that means using only science-backed ingredients that have been proven to work for women. They make no compromise when it comes to quality, and it shows. And the biggest benefit, feeling like myself again. That's what women mention over and over in their reviews, and there are over 14,000 reviews of Hormone Harmony. For a limited time, you can get 15% off the entire first order at happymammoth.com. Just use code PEACE at checkout. That's happymammoth.com and use the code PEACE for 15% off today.
My book, Unpunished, is finally here. It is my journey into connected parenting, the idea of perfection and how it nearly took me down as a mom. I give you my best thinking around how to be a connected parent and the insights that I've discovered over the last 12 years of this incredible journey. I'm giving my book away for free, plus shipping and handling. So go to unpunished.com and get yours today. We're shipping domestically and we're also shipping internationally. Now, back to the show.
That leads me to this idea of natural consequences. And we talk a lot about natural consequences in this parenting method and just how they really work to teach kids about their own internal morality. Like, where are my lines? Where are my bumpers? Whereas if you're using punishments or rewards, a kid doesn't find out like, oh, I stepped too far and said too many mean things and that didn't feel good, because they're not even allowed to try it on.
So I definitely think that the natural consequences are often described as logical consequences.
Yes, thank you.
I hear that all the time.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I'm like, that's not actually a natural consequence. That's a logical consequence. Like, because if we're imposing them, then it's not natural.
Thank
Like,
you.
if we have to impose it, it's not natural.
Right? People will say all the time to me, like, well, if there isn't time to do something, then I'm just going to take the thing away. And I'm like, well, hold on. That's not natural. Yes,
That's
it
not
is.
natural.
I know.
Right. Right. Exactly. I think I had a conversation about this. I kind of talked about it briefly, but I was saying, that there's levels. Like, let's say we take the phone away because they were using it and you took the phone away just because, like, arbitrarily, right? That's an arbitrary consequence. You took the phone away because they were using it inappropriately. That is a logical consequence. But I said, that's not necessarily how I personally would handle it. But there are people in the comments that are like, no, that's a natural consequence. And I'm like, no, it's literally not. The natural consequence of inappropriate phone behavior is going to be, now you have seen something that was inappropriate. That's a natural consequence, right? And so I think that that's hard for people to grasp and understand, but it's because natural consequences don't work in a non-collaborative environment.
Well, that's right.
They don't work. Natural consequences can be very harmful if proactive parenting isn't occurring and isn't happening. But there's definitely a difference. And I think that it's frustrating to see parents feel like collaborating with your child and helping them to learn from mistakes is a bad thing, because that's what learning is.
Yeah, I think I think it comes from fear, right? I'm so scared that if I don't come down on them or tell them or reprimand them or whatever, that they aren't going to learn. And so then they're like, I need but if there's not a natural consequence for this, then I have to give them, a man-made up one, because that will teach them the behavior. But I really see with my kids now, I have an 18-year-old and a 15-year-old. So I've been doing this for a long time. And I feel like I can really see now how effective just feeling bad about something you've done, feeling shameful about something you've done, feeling remorseful. And that doesn't always come right away. And it doesn't always come in every instance. But over time, like you said, if you're playing the long game, you really see that they learn from their own mistakes so well. And it's so much better because it doesn't damage our relationship. And it doesn't add extra shame into the whole, parenting and relationship that you have with your kid.
I agree.
The natural consequences are where I live. I love them. Should I say that out loud to my kids? I don't think so. What about the to-do list? People are like, I can't do connective parenting. I can't do special time. I can't do this because I have too much to do, or we have too many activities, or I can't do collaboration because I don't have time to collaborate with my kids. It has to be my way or the highway because this is how it has to be because we don't have time.
Yeah. I mean, like, internally, I feel that way sometimes. Like, that's realistic. Like, that's the survive, right? I love Dan Siegel's idea of, like, survive and thrive as we're trying to transition parenting styles, because there are times that's what my mistakes look like for me. That's like the to-do list or the checklist or whatever, where my survive kicks in and we're just like, all right, look, we got to go. Like, and being able to shift the mindset of I'm behaving this way because my child versus the thrive pieces, which is like me being able to have a conversation with myself or my child and be like, we need a better way. I don't have that better way right this second. But how I just responded is not because of you. And I'm committed to us figuring out a better way versus I just responded like that because you weren't moving or because you didn't put your shoes on. I think for me, that has been what has allowed those mistakes to not be okay, but to be more restorative and opportunities for creative problem solving so that we can create our life in a way that works for all of us, works for everybody. Like the checklist has had to change, the to-do list has had to change, but I'm intentional about meeting everybody's needs, not just mine.
Yeah. I find too, when I build in, I mean, I really lean into connective parenting and using connection and the tools of connection. When I feel like when I really lean into connecting first before I have the to-do list to do and really filling up my kids' cup and really making them feel good before I embark on my own stuff, that I just have more success. And that, that's such a tiny thing, but it actually means a lot. I used to do it in the morning all the time, like play with the kids for 20 minutes before you ask them to put their shoes or anything on, play with them in the afternoon when they get home. Like it's so tiny and yet it's monumental for a kid who's just
You
feels
have
like,
no idea.
yeah.
Yeah, we've had the easiest mornings this past week. Ken broke her bed last week, and I haven't gotten her a new one yet. And so we've been back to co-sleeping. And so, like in the evenings, we've we've been back to co-sleeping, and so then in the evenings we've been doing like acro yoga, or we'll do a body scan together, or we're doing similar things, but we're doing them like in my bed. So we always do notes and dopes. We always go over the day, but it's just like something really sweet about okay, you can't just go do your night routine by yourself. Like you got to come in my room, and now you're in my room. We're doing it together, and all that thing. And the mornings have been so much easier. Like just they weren't necessarily awful or difficult before, but it's just like she just like I'm up.
Yep.
Like let's go. There's I don't know the energy is different, and so I definitely am for sure with you on the connective piece. I don't like to use it in a coercive way, and so I'm really careful to not be like, okay, we'll connect to get them to do what you want them to do. But when our goal is connection, our homes do look different.
Well, yeah. And I always tell people, they'll be like, but what do I do when they won't brush their teeth? And I'm like, well, you can use play or whatever, but you have to be using play and connection all the time.
All the
Your home
time.
has to feel like it's connective. And what you did yesterday will come to fruition tomorrow and the next day and
Yep.
3 weeks from now. And so it isn't really about the moment, but that's so hard when, again, we have the to-do list, right?
Well, you know what's funny to me about connection is that I feel like if there was a camera watching people use parenting tools, right, they would not be as regulated as they think they are. And so for me, connecting with your child actually changes your approach and your demeanor and makes collaboration or problem solving, conflict resolution a lot more likely because it changes you. Like spending time with her and like having those gooey, like rich moments that you have when you look at your newborn, it impacts the way that I wake up and I'm like, oh, you're right there. This is like my sweet baby. I'm not going to be like, all right, I said it 10 times. It's time to get up. Like it changes our demeanor when we connect as well.
We need it, right? We need connection. I don't know. Are you a single mom too?
Yes, I
Yeah,
am.
me too. And so it's like, it's just me, right? And so I don't have a partner to connect with. So I'm like, I need to connect with these girls because I need it to feed my soul. And if I'm operating without connection, I've flipped my lid too. I'm not,
Yep.
I'm not in my best calm self. And so I think you're so right. When I connect with my kids, I'm like, my nervous system just rests. My limbic system can connect with them. I can feel at ease. And then my to-do list doesn't feel so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's so true. And it's difficult to I don't even think I would say that it's difficult to find the time to do it. I think that it's difficult to find the energy sometimes. But again, that's the survive and thrive. Okay, that means that in order to thrive, I need to figure out why I don't have the energy for my child. I'm not just going to say, okay, I don't have the energy right now. And I would say that to my child. Like, I take responsibility for any survival state we're in.
Good for you.
It doesn't mean I'm going to fake it or force or whatever, but I'm like, hey, if I don't have the energy right now, that has nothing to do with you. but I'm going to figure it out. Or, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And the other day, we were going through a morning routine, and it was like a checklist type of situation. And we get in the car, and she's just like, Mom, you seemed like a little irritated when you responded about blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I did. And she was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, well, that wasn't my intention. I didn't get any sleep or enough sleep last night. I need to make sure I do. And then I said, how do you feel about that? Did that hurt your feelings? And she was like, oh no, I'm just making sure you are okay. And I like got a little emotional. And the reason was because own it in that way, they don't internalize it. Like, she's like,
Right.
you were acting that way because of something
You did.
have going on. But the flip side is I also know that mommy's committed to figuring out if something's going on.
Yeah.
She's going to figure it out so it doesn't become a thing. And so that was just really like cool and special to me. She was like, girl, it didn't hurt my feelings. I was just making sure you were okay.
Oh, no, I'm not bothered. Apparently you are having a problem.
You're bothered.
Pia did the same thing the other day. I was in a mood. The garage door broke and I couldn't get it open. So I couldn't get the car out. And we had to go to dance. So we had to Uber to dance. And I was like in the Uber and I was pissed. And she was like, and I was like, okay, I know you have a math test on tomorrow. Are you studying for it today? And she's like, you do not need to take your bad mood out on me. End of story.
First, that's disrespectful. Like, what?
No, I was like, thank you. You're right. I'm going to sit over here and breathe for a minute.
I love that. Like, that is relationship, right? Like, I don't think that that's disrespectful, but I know that like somebody is like, what the heck? And I'm like, no, that's powerful that they can voice that. And it's powerful not only that they're able to voice that, but that they feel safe voicing that to you. When I share my 11-year-old saying stuff like that, people are like, this is satire. 11-year-old didn't say that. And I'm just like, I gave you half of that articulation. What do you think? My child didn't come to me and say you're more focused on the night routine than our relationship?
No.
What? That's just a regular Tuesday.
No.
What do you mean?
I mean, my 18-year-old's spicy. She'll tell you exactly how she feels and she's not mincing any words. And, you know, she doesn't do that anywhere else but here. Here she feels safe to do it. At school, she's an angel.
I know. Yes, literally. I think that's also another challenge that some of us face, is like, me being the safe space. It is a challenge to be the safe space. There's a narrative going around right now that that's not a genuine thing. Like, children should be more respectful or more angelic, as you said, at home than in other spaces. And God, that's just so frustrating to me.
It's so interesting. I have a really good anecdote for that. I worked with this couple a while ago from the Deep South. They're from Georgia. They were military family, so very traditional and strict and whatever. And they had a little girl. She was in kindergarten and she was going to school and she was hitting everyone. And she was hitting the principal and she was hitting everybody. But she was angelic at home because they were spanking her and they were really disciplining her. And so they were at their wits' end and they're like, this crazy lady on the internet says she can help us. We're going to try her out. So I started working with them and we started working on connection, getting rid of all the spanking, getting rid of everything. Well, we saw it flip-flop immediately. She stopped hitting at school. She stopped being unkind at school and she started to really take out her aggression at home. And she did that for like probably 30, 45 days. And then she totally started to regulate. And so I'd say that narrative is BS in my opinion, and that people haven't really, you have to deeply work and understand kids and parents to make sense of that being false, but it is, in my opinion.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I am the safe space for both of my kids. My oldest is very good at setting boundaries at school. She's very good at articulating herself and regulating herself. And she'll just be like, I just talked to myself. I just said, don't respond to that. I set a boundary firmly. Da, 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 da. And then she comes home and it's like, I shouldn't have said that, Mom. I apologize for how I expressed that. Or like there's constant like practice. And that's how I see it. They're here to practice. My youngest is very very calm at school. Very calm at school. I mean, I observed one time. I went to the school to observe, and I was just like, "Who is this child? How are you regulated?" Like, where is the hyperactive, inattentive behavior? She comes home, it's like wild thornberries, Tasmanian devil, all over the place energy. And I'm just like, I'm so glad you feel safe enough
Yes.
to be that way.
Yes.
I am so glad that you are showing me who you are. Like, that's so important for me for them to have those spaces.
They're so lucky to have you, Destini.
Same, girl, same.
Thank you. This was such a good conversation. Anything else to add?
Honestly, it's a message, I guess I will say, to those that feel like this isn't working. We'll just loop back. And if you feel comfortable sharing as well, I'll share my definition of working.
Yeah.
And you can share your definition of working. I know that a lot of parents feel like your parenting is working if your children are behaving. But for me, I feel like the parenting is working, number one, if we still have a strong relationship, if my children feel safe, and if I am growing in my behaviors and dysregulation. If that's happening, then I feel like what I'm doing is quote unquote working.
Yeah, I love that. I'll piggyback off that and just say, I really feel like it's working. I can feel the relationship I have with my kids. I can feel the ruptures. I can feel the repairs. I can feel the ups and I can feel the downs. And what I feel mostly about my kids is this like mutual respect where I know they actually do. And I don't look for or want respect, but I know that they respect who I am and I respect who they are overall. And all the bumps and bruises in between and the mean phrases and the times I lose my mind, that I just try not to worry or lament on those. And I just focus on how I really deeply feel about my kids and how I know they feel about me.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you.
This is sweet. Well, thank you for being here. Where can people find you?
I am Destini and everywhere. Destini and I, ANN, Instagram, Facebook, all that.
Yeah. And she has a book that's been out for a little while, but it's called Very Intentional Parenting. I want to get a copy of that and read it.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, I will. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in on the Peace and Parenting podcast, and we'll see you all next time.